Hey there, Dango Stu here. Today's video is about getting back into working on my trawler after a couple of weeks off and is proudly sponsored by marineengine.com. I'd like to give this video a slightly more specific theme, but really we're getting into the sort of home stretch to getting the boat back on the water, so I'm really just going around doing all the finishing touches that I can. Obviously the primary goal is to get the boat watertight, so I'm working at the moment on still painting the engine bay, cleaning it. It's such a tedious job that I can't do more than a little bit each week before I'm over it, but it's getting there. Then we need to put some new through-hull fittings on. So I've just ordered those. They actually arrived today, I think. So at the moment, just getting all the holes prepped. Just going to use this little flap wheel 60 grit just to clean out the inside so I can paint it before putting the fitting through. This one here is the raw water outlet. I can actually fit this larger size wheel into it. This one I had to kind of move around, but this one will squeeze in, which is all right. Certainly means I can clean it up nicely and clean it up really like plumb and square and round. I'm using this as my test fit though, and it's definitely got quite a bit of movement in here. Obviously it's critical I get these right because I don't want the boat sinking after all this effort. So I'm tempted to actually even try and find a bit of steel pipe that just fits over here and see if I can get it in there, and then maybe even weld it round and then just have that just for a bit of extra strength and to close up that gap. Then obviously heaps of Sikaflex anyway, but just to give myself a little bit of extra security. So I think I'll keep this in the car and I'll go see if I can find some pipe that'll fit it. Anyway, I'll keep cleaning it out anyway because I think I will go the pipe, so I may as well make it the cleanest surface I can. See, that one I reckon is a pretty good fit. Goes in, but it's got marginal play in it. Obviously I've got to clean this surface up. Need to find my vice grip so I can wind these screws out. This one here is the raw water inlet, and it's by far the smallest. With these openings, there's a collar inside, a collar outside, and this steel here is actually the hull steel, and that's the bit that's sticking in. So really I could just run a little die grinder around that bit, and this fitting would probably go in. At the moment it's close, but just no cigar. You know, I think I will get the 240 volt drill. This time the drill's got the strength, but that chuck doesn't have the grip. The one that was too small now isn't, thanks to those sanding flat wheels. So fits in nicely. Now I'm just gonna get some epoxy primer onto here, some paint, and then we got a little bit of a gap just to get some good Sikaflex bed all around here. Now I'll just grab some vice grips and we'll get these old bolts out. These. Oh well. Snapping the head off's good enough. May as well just got the angle grinder out. This one didn't get sandblasted because it had the bronze grill over it, so I've taken that off. I'm going to hit this with a grinder to get the gunk off and get rid of this stainless screw, and then we'll get some epoxy on here. This one's actually quite a good size for the fitting to go straight in, and it's not corroded on the inside like the other one. Alright, I'll get the wire brush into some of the depressions and then we'll get a bit of oxalic acid on it too to clean up that rust, convert the rust before we put the epoxy on. I've decided to make life easy for myself and go with this flexible hose for the plumbing now. So this is the right diameter for here. I've just got to measure this out diameter so I can buy some of those really high quality T-bolt clamps. But I think this stuff is the, you know, Lloyd's Register stuff. Should be well and truly up to the job. You can see it's got this spiral wire in it so it doesn't kink at all. I'm glad I'm changing it all because as I was taking some of this hard line out, for example, found that in the back there, so, you know, right through. Now it's probably a good time to have a quick chat about, you know, going from solid metal gate valves to plastic ball valves, from solid metal piping to hose. You know, part of me goes, why are you going to something that's not as strong? Part of me goes, what does it matter if it's strong enough? It's really hard to find those old school fittings these days, and if anything goes wrong, I want to carry spares. It's great to be able to get cheap modern fittings that are made out of materials that are much stronger than perhaps you might think. Fibre reinforced plastic's very strong. The ABYC spec says you have to be able to put 250 kilos on it for 30 seconds for it to pass as a sort of a through hole fitting. So I'm going to be rigging up some brackets as well to support it so that when you have the plastic coming up in the ball valve, you can't just sort of snap it off by having a long lever. I'm going to have a metal bracket round it so that it's all really, really strong. Here we are in the engine bay again, just doing lots of bits and pieces today, feeling a little bit demotivated if I'm honest, but you know, I think that's just the way it gets towards the end of long projects. I don't know how people like Doug on SV Seeker and Damien and Jess have been going for years and years, but anyway. So what I'm going to do in here is been doing one sort of between one rib at a time. You can probably see a little bit I didn't paint properly because I found some tiny pitting there and I just want to weld it, you know. I'm just gonna do it right, want to know that it's done. In the meantime, just going to start grinding all the old paint off this section now, so I've got one more done. I finally found some larger packing. I think this is 1/2 inch packing and it seems to be the right size for this stern glam. I think the reason this was leaking so badly is that it had 3/8 packing in it. It was too small. There was just no way it was ever going to compress enough. So I've got the right size. I've got 2 packets, so I should have enough to do sort of 3 or 4 complete rings. So that's one of the things I've really got to do to make the boat watertight. It's funny though, I was sort of sitting outside thinking, can't be bothered, and Dave came down. He's working on Delstar still. The boat's now in Sydney. Gearbox is out, heat exchanger is out, all that kind of stuff. So lots of good stuff happening there. And yeah, it was kind of nice. We just talked about the boats for a while and definitely feeling motivated again. I highly recommend if you do a project like this to, you know, just find a partner to do it with. I think it makes a huge difference just from the point of view of staying motivated as much as anything else. Anyway, let's get grinding. How jealous I am of Damien and Jess getting their engine bay sandblasted. One of the big advantages to coming home by boat every day is you get to sort of go through the moorings and get some ideas. I want to put a marlin board on the back of the trawler before I put it back in the water, and I really like this design. I'll show you. I think you're doing some, I like the supports, they're a good handle as well. Just a bit of angle welded across like that. And then to supports against the transom. Okay, and this one sort of comes at an angle so that the timber's not cantilevered. It's nice, actually drilled and plugged as well. Obviously past its prime, but I think it's a really nice design. So I think that's the way I'm going to go. It's probably also worth mentioning how the little tender's going. And it's going really well. Tatsu's running nicely. I've been running just on the internal tank. It's a reasonable run up here, but it easily makes it there and back, which is great. Just saves having a big fuel tank in the boat. Once the trawler's moored off the island, it'll, you know, make 10 trips. It's not losing pressure much at all, so I'm not having to pump it up very often. I went away for 2 weeks, so I had to put a little bit in it, but you know, that's it. I've also attached some lights here. The light on the top is just batteries, and it's one of those starport fittings. So I've attached the starport here. Because it's all the same fitting, I can put the light straight into the port on the transom, or I can add up to 3 sections of pole that get supplied. I really need to put the third one in just to get it a bit higher, but I'll do that when I get there. With this 6 horsepower, the boat will plane with me in it. It'll do about 11-12 knots, so that's pretty good. You know, here we're in a 4 knot zone, so I'm just putting along, but it will actually get up and go, so that's nice. I do need to find 5 horsepower cowling for it, because 5 horsepower and less, you don't need to register a boat in New South Wales, so I'll have to get a different cowling. It's now Friday morning. Can't quite bring myself to jump in the engine bay and start grinding yet. So I'm going to tape up the sponson here and get a bead of Sikaflex between the hull and the rubbing strake. Okay, so I've put masking tape, it's this kind of plasticky exterior masking tape, along the sponson and the rubbing strake. Now I'm just going to put a bead of Sikaflex all the way along it. The Sikaflex I'm using is the 291 Marine again. Link to the Amazon store where you can get it if you're interested in it. I'm going to cut the tip reasonably fine so I don't end up with a huge bead. I just want it to, you know, stay inside the masking tape as much as possible. Just using a bit more of the detergent to smooth it off now. It's coming up pretty nicely. Next job I'm going to do is put this prop protector onto the prop shaft. It's just a blade like this that's designed to cut any ropes that you pick up around the prop. When this unit comes, it's put together with a couple of bolts to hold it together. And it's got this protective strip around the edge so you don't cut yourself. Ignore all the prop shield I've got on it because I was doing a few test fits earlier. So what you do is you take these bolts out that hold it together, and it comes with some new ones that have a bit of Loctite thread sealant on them. So we'll take the original ones out and install it with these ones. You even get a little sticker for the back of the boat to warn people you've got it installed, which is kind of cool. This is designed for a slightly smaller prop shaft. This isn't a standard size, so we kind of knew that when I was talking to Prop Protector on the phone. But I'm just going to crank it as tight as I can, and then we'll put the grub screw in up here. The gap's even both sides, and it's actually still closing up, but I'm not really willing to push my luck in case something goes snap. I don't think that gap's going to make a huge difference. It's not how it's supposed to be, but it's the best we're going to get with this prop shaft. And then this top hole here is our little grub screw, just to stop it rotating on the shaft. Alright, and that's what it looks like on from the back. this stuck on. I think this kind of thing really is worth having. It's not hard to pick up a rope, either lose your bearings, accidentally pick up a mooring line, it falls over the back of the boat, you reverse, you pick it up. Sometimes if you're really lucky, you can just put a boat ahead, put it in forward and spin it back off, but a lot of the time you're not that lucky. And once you've got a rope around your prop, you're not going anywhere. As I was doing that bit of circumflexing along the sponson, Dave turned up, and after I'd finished, we went up to Mount Karingai to see Jason, who had been fixing his gearbox. It's all looking really awesome. Jason had basically replaced all the internals in the sense of like the plates, the seals, the bearings, all that kind of stuff. Then he popped it on his dyno, he does sorts of pressure testing on it to make sure it's 100%. We then asked him what he thought was the story with it. And what he actually does is modify these gearboxes, because he said the original design is actually a bit flawed. What happens is the pump pumps the oil, it goes down a particular gallery, then it goes to the valve body where there's sort of pressure relief and, you know, the valves for changing gears, all that kind of stuff. And it turns out the oil that goes to the cooler is oil that bypasses a certain pressure relief. So it gets to a certain pressure and it uses that oil, and whatever's left over after that goes to the cooler. So if that valve isn't opening, you actually get no oil going to the cooler. So what it appears is there was a leak, oil was ending up in the bilge afterwards. We sort of eventually found all that where it flowed to. But there was no obvious signs of it because it wasn't actually leaking initially. That engine had been running, for example, against the dock-in gear for about 6 hours. I mean, we did multiple day cruises before we actually headed down the coast. I probably didn't make that obvious, but there was quite a bit of testing. And there was never any sign of a leak. But what happens then, eventually, if it gets hot enough, obviously heat equates to pressure, all sorts of things, and eventually this valve's opened, a small amount's flowed through, and it started leaking out. What Jason has now done, and what he does with these gearboxes, he modifies them so that the path then goes from the pump, so every bit of oil that goes out the pump goes through the cooler, then it comes back in, then it goes to the valve body. So you're essentially cooling all the oil all the time. So we think overheating problems solved, and obviously now we can identify the leak because the oil is going through. So if there's a leak, you're going to see it straight away. The moment you fire the engine up, that oil is being pumped through the cooler. So we think that problem's pretty much solved. Then obviously sandblasted, painted, ready to go. Jason was saying, look, if you change the oil once a year, regardless of hours, you'll never see me again. You know, it'll just last forever. So that's really cool. I haven't actually shown it in a video yet, but Jason also rebuilt the gearbox from my engine, so I'm glad about that. Gonna have a lot of confidence in it. It wasn't cheap to get it rebuilt, so that burnt up a lot of the money that was supposed to go towards the engine rebuild, which I still have to pay for. So now it's probably a great time to say thank you to all the people who've signed up on Patreon, because it's your donations that are really going to help get the gearbox and the engine done. So I really appreciate you guys signing up for that. That's very kind of you. But it means at the end of the day, we can have full confidence in the engine, full confidence in the gearbox. With regards to the anchor rod, I'm now thinking it was UV related. It turns out there's no hatch for the anchor well. So although if water goes in, it just drains out, it doesn't stop the sun sort of beating down on the anchor rod the whole time. So I think it was sort of UV damage that weakened that anchor rod. So obviously that's going to get replaced, and then perhaps looking at some sort of hatch to keep the sun off the new one. So getting to the pointy end of this project now, at least to the point of getting it in the water, the dump and run, as Damien and Jess would say, I've got to get the electrics going, because I'm heading to the US on the 3rd of September, and the boat's going in on the 30th, as I think I mentioned. So I really want to make sure I've got at least enough of the electrics in to have some good working bilge pumps before I go away, and a bilge pump alarm. Regarding the electrics, I spoke to Jeff from Pacific Yacht Systems on the phone a while ago, actually while I was on holidays, and he gave me lots of awesome advice. And one of the things he really did was convince me to go a full 24-volt system. 24-volt house batteries, 24-volt starting systems. A few people had mentioned going 24 volts, but I think what I got out of the conversation with Jeff is all the reasons why, you know, and they're so compelling in the end. You're like, right, okay, time to change the plan. So I'll talk about that in a separate video where I'll start actually doing the electrics, but definitely going 24-volt house, 24-volt starter. Talk about the US trip. So it's starting to get planned a little bit more detail. I know I'm leaving it late, but at this stage we're looking like landing in Dulles Airport in about the 4th of September, I think it is, heading down towards Chesapeake Bay for a little while, New York for a couple of nights, then up towards
Vermont to go to Brandon to see marineengine.com, then going over to Chicago, getting a car and driving to LA. So that's the plan. On the drive from Chicago to LA, we'll be going through Tulsa, Oklahoma, and we'll be seeing Doug from SV Seeker, and we're having a meetup at his house on Saturday the 21st between 1 and 4. The address is in the description, so big thanks to Doug for volunteering to host that. Should be a fun day. Really looking forward to seeing Doug's boat. You know, it's come an amazing way. He's in the process of painting now, so he's definitely, you know, major milestone, you know, really turned a corner with that project. And then when we get to LA, the last night before is Friday the 27th September, and we're in the process of organising a meetup in Pasadena there as well. So there'll be one on the 21st in Tulsa and one on the 27th at Pasadena. Haven't organised anything kind of for the East Coast. I'm sure we can organise something around that sort of New York, Boston area, but nothing sort of finalised yet. So this was the first video back into it after a bit of a break. I went away with my wife for a couple of weeks, which was nice. You know, a bit of a road trip, just visited friends really. Visited one friend down towards Berrydale, and he took us out cross-country skiing, which was fun. It was, you know, yes, it does snow in Australia, and the great thing is it's nice and cheap. No lift passes, all that kind of expensive stuff with skiing. Then I visited another mate, Steve, who lives down in Bega, and he also has his own YouTube channel called Vintage Restorations Australia. So Steve is a conservator. He's worked a lot on objects, conserving objects from the Maritime Museum, the Australian War Memorial, that kind of stuff. Really knows his stuff, but he's also doing some Land Rover restoration. So it was fun catching up with him. He used to live on Dangar, don't see him that much anymore. But back now into it. I'm going to start writing a list of the things left to do. I've got to still show you around. Still got to redo the supercharger, pull it apart, clean it. I've got a new impeller kit and everything for the new seals for the Jabsco pump, so I've got to get that organised. And then I think somewhere here, yeah, I should clean up. Yeah, we'll do that today. Yeah. So new seals, bearings, everything in the supercharger, brand new water pump on it as well. Another little bit of exciting news is once the boat's back in the water, I'll be doing lots more mechanical work on it. I've got to do the whole top sides, and boats always need, you know, servicing work, whatever. But as I said earlier, I do intend to start using the boat for sort of You're a noisy bugger. Keep it down. No one wants to hear you screeching. That's what I was going to say. So another bit of exciting news. I think I mentioned earlier that when the boat's back in the water, I'm going to use it for a bit of underwater search, salvage, that kind of stuff. And I've been speaking to a company that manufactures an underwater ROV, a remote operated vehicle. So it's a kind of, you know, a camera, lights, and you control it from the boat, so you can sort of go hunting around. So I think that's going to be a really important bit of kit in the process of hunting for stuff and finding it. So I'll probably, you know, generally use the side scan sonar, look around. If you see something of interest, launch the ROV. If, you know, it looks promising, jump in the water and go for a dive. When that arrives, I'll definitely do a little demo of it. We'll probably just test it in the pool up here, see how it goes, and then we'll use it in the river once we get on the water in earnest. All right, well, that's about it for this week. Take care, and I will catch you next week. We're going to be doing some work on Delstar 2 again as well. We've solved the gearbox problem, the anchor row problem, and next job we've got to do is we're installing a Ray Marine unit in the wheelhouse, so we've got proper sat-nav in the boat as well, finally. So that'll probably be next week, as well as some work on my boat. All right, well, take care, and I'll catch you then. See ya.